I am honored and privileged to be here. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think first is just to appreciate the role of CARA as a convener, as a platform provider for stakeholder engagement. The government is very keen to address this issue of stakeholder participation. You know, public participation is one of the vaguest requirements in law. So whenever you try and look for a legal definition of what public stakeholder engagement means, you'd never quite find it. But what we have found is when you deal with very well-established organizations like CARA as platforms to engage communities and stakeholders, you find that the resistance sort of melts away, because you sort of hit the right demographic, the people who have the trust of those communities. The message that you give them is able to be conveyed, and what feedback they give you tends to be a representation of what the views are of those communities. So just to say thank you to the team at CARA for soldiering through. I've been with you from the time you set up, and I always asked myself whether CARA would survive in its different iterations. So when you had the man from Tongaren at the helm, my very good friend Mutoro, we had interesting engagements around in my previous life when we were trying to, you know, it's so funny how life goes. We were trying to increase network coverage in Nairobi, and the residents would say, we don't need mobile coverage. In fact, we are okay with our landlines. So please don't disturb us with these things you're putting all over the place. But we ended up talking and getting to meet. I remember some meetings in Buruburu, specifically Petunia Court, Phase 5, where I got to meet a very interesting group of people. Today, when I meet with them, they're like, look, you know, it was so good because what you guys did for us, number one, the fact that that base station is there has improved security in that neighborhood. We always have good network coverage, and a lot of things have happened as a consequence of that investment. But we would never have been able to make that happen without this platform of CARA and residents associations. Now in this new role, the Big Four, and specifically the aspiration on housing, is one that has largely been misunderstood. And it's been misunderstood because of a number of mismanaged expectations. One is that, I don't need a house, why are you levying me? If I'm a salaried employee, nobody wants to see your pay being docked. So that's one set of stakeholders. If you already have a home, you wonder, why am I being dragged into this aspiration? If you don't have a home, you start thinking, is this really going to be possible? Can the government, which has been promising since time immemorial delivery of affordable housing, is this something that will actually materialize over time? And the reason I specifically told Henry that I am very keen to do this, because I had an epiphany in the middle of the various boxing I was getting to attend this function. And that was, any opportunity we get to articulate with a level of clarity what this housing aspiration entails, I think would not be an opportunity wasted. Even if you are 3 people, I would still have come and talk to those 3 people who are here, because that's how important it is for us. Life as we know it is going to change so dramatically over the next 10 years. You take a neighborhood where the user was one domestic household residence, 5 persons in an acre of land. Today, an acre of land can have 1,000 people. And this is the reality as we know it, and will continue going forward, because land is a finite resource. We have not stopped growing in terms of people and population, so something must give. So either we change or we redefine the laws of physics, or we simply find a way to live in this new arrangement. And without taking a new look at housing, look at the laws that support building technology, for instance. My colleague had alluded to it. We have been so fixated with brick and mortar. Brick and mortar may not take us to where we want to go. There's only so much quarrying you can do over a period of time. The question of quality of living spaces, particularly in the context of what we call social housing. In many instances, we have been prescribing the wrong treatment. We think we know the ailment and we prescribe a treatment, but what then happens is something we were not expecting. There's the classic case of Madare 4A, and many of you can remember, when a massive slum upgrading exercise was undertaken. We took time to redo and put new housing units. The people who were living there were allocated the housing. Immediately they were allocated, they moved out, rented the houses, moved back into the slum because of the arbitrage opportunity created. Because you could never satisfy that entire gap in one move. So whatever housing you then put into the market was going to be immediately received at a premium, and somebody stands to gain commercially. So the intended beneficiary was never the one who will get that change in their lives. A rethink of that in terms of, even as we look at what we are going to do for social housing, and in terms of putting out units bankrolled by the Exchequer with our partners like Habitat, we are looking at safety. Simple things. Access through a slum. Can a fire truck go right through from end to end? We have the famous case of Mukuru, Kayaba. We have riverbank at the edges there, where today you can't even see the river. From Mata Hospital to Quarry or North Airport Road for 8 kilometers, you cannot see the river because people have built on top of it. People have built houses on top of the river, Mabati temporary houses. God forbid we have a very serious, another flooding situation, we will lose people. And that is why you also see the approach we have taken to demolitions. It's not very popular. It only started coming into the news when we moved this side of Nairobi, but we have been demolishing houses for the last 6 or 7 months. It was happening in neighborhoods where perhaps the people were not as vocal or the business interests were not as strong. But for us to build a generation, a society for our future and for our children, we really ought to put this business interest to the side, look at safety as the first priority, and also just look at the dignity of the people living there. Because whereas many people feel like they have been deprived of a home, what you've actually done is you have saved their lives, because by them continuing to stay there, they are endangering themselves and their families. So it is this, again, sort of engagement that we've been trying to have. You have it in different forums. You can have it in very politicized forums where sometimes the messages get lost, or at very high-level forums where you're meeting with people who wear ties like us most of the time. But the people who really need to hear this message don't get it. So when we sit with you, we are sure that the people in this room represent interest across the board. And when they go back to their respective residents' associations, they are able to articulate these messages back. There is no ill intent in the question of demolition. There is no individuals or persons who are being targeted. Our priority is to restore sensible planning, law and order. It is a very close collaboration between ourselves and the county government, because urban planning for many years had been thrown into the wind, which is why you see some of the absurdities when you drive around the city. You cannot explain why one structure is next to another structure, because it just looks out of kilter with what should be happening over there. So I wanted to talk about what next. So what next? I always get this worry about, okay, you guys are taxing us this 1.5 and you're going to, you're borrowing money. Kenya's debt has tripled. We are buckling under loans. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll just pose a rhetorical question to you. How many of you are rationed water? How many of your neighborhoods are rationed water? Yes. Now, where will this water come from? You're not going to collect water from your roof, certainly not in Nairobi. Karumenu Dam, Ruiru 2, expansion of Ndakaini, Muranga Northern Collector, all that water is coming here. And even when those projects are complete, some of you will still be rationed because it's not enough. Nairobi's population continues to expand so rapidly. The consumption per capita continues to increase. Without making these investments, a dam is not built in 1 day or 2 days. It's built over 3 years, over 4 years. You waste at least 2 years doing stakeholder engagement, acquisition of land, bargaining here and there, trying to agree on what the cost of compensation is going to be for the people who will be affected by these programs. You then have to secure corridors to make sure that that water comes to the city and is supplied to the city. We have not renewed a lot of our reticulation infrastructure in terms of how that water actually makes its way from Dakaine to your tap. These things cost money. We have to invest. Kilelesho, which used to be single dwelling unit residents, now there are no more. It's 200-300 units per 1 acre or per every 2 acres. Water, sanitation, road infrastructure, expansion of the ring road, Kilimani, Westlands ring road, all these big roads that you're seeing being done, opening up this city. That costs money. So when somebody asks you, when Kenya is taking loans, what are we doing with these loans? These loans are being used to start making this country future-proof, ready for your children, not to deal with your immediate cash flow crisis. So many people are feeling the pinch today and saying, no, we should not invest. But it's not about you. It's not about us. It's about us leaving a city and a country that is fit for purpose for our children. So if today, for example, Red Hill, you should be able to go from Red Hill to Ngong Road in 15 minutes by the end of next year. 15 minutes in peak traffic. You should be able to go from City Mortuary to Karen Roundabout in 15 minutes in peak traffic. You should be able to go from Ngong Road, Prestige Center, to Langata, Onyonka in 5 minutes in peak traffic. Do you guys see these things on the road, or is it just me who is imagining? You can see this happening, can't you? Everywhere you go. So when somebody asks you this question about debt, ask them to show you how it is that we are going to move this country from step A to B. Now, I want to look at the issue of housing specifically. We are not taking debt to build 500,000 houses. Let me just make that very clear. We have two sorts of houses. Within this 500,000, we have broken it into 20%, which will be social housing. And by social housing, we mean the people who are paying rent today to, of 3,000, 5,000 to 10,000 shillings. Those are people who are in need of a government intervention, both in terms of the security of where they stay, the infrastructure for common services, lighting, access for safety. Those people are communities. We cannot pretend that we are going to live here with all these mass urban settlements and not do something about it. So that is one end. Then we have affordable housing, which makes the bulk of our low-income to middle-class homes. Who does not want to own a home? You know, you must question the rationale of a country where you have deficit, as indicated, of 200,000 homes per year. But that does not reflect in the mortgage situation. So there is a need for a market correction of sorts. So we have to first deal with supply, which is creating an environment for private sector to scale up housing. We have to deal with a fair way in which people who need houses to be able to access those houses. So when my colleague here, Mr. Butcher, was talking about building an online portal for access, it's not a theoretical thing. It's something very simple today. If we have 500,000 units, let's take an example of the 6 developments that will be done in Nairobi. Maybe cumulatively they should produce about 80 to 100,000 units. You have Mavoko, you have, I think, Ngara, which we're starting, Shauri Moyo, and others. So you put down these houses. The first question is, we must first deal with the people who have been displaced, so they must get first right of refusal. That's one. But where there were 30,000, maybe where there were 100 houses, we're going to have 1,000 houses. So it's easy to deal with the people who are displaced and give them back houses. But how do you ensure parity for the allocation of the rest? And that's why we are taking a model which has worked very well in neighboring countries, particularly Ethiopia and others, which is what they are calling a lottery system. So you enter your details. Number one, if you are contributing to the tax or the levy, or I shouldn't call it a tax, if you're contributing to the housing levy, number one. If you are a tax-paying citizen, so you must have a KRA. KRA must know you. Whether or not you pay taxes, KRA must know you, so you must have a PIN. Your mobile number, your identity number. If you own any other land or any other thing, we must know. Where do you live? Where do you work? How much do you earn? Because in the order of ranking, this system will be able to prioritize you. So if, for example, you are bidding for a house in Shauri Moyo, and you live in Nakuru, and you work in Nakuru, so even though you might be entitled to get that house in Shauri Moyo, first priority will be given to the people living in Nairobi, near that place, who fit all the criteria. When they get the house, they will be able to now sign a tenant purchase scheme and pay a predictable amount of rent until that house becomes theirs. So whatever they were paying in rent, so if rent was 25,000 shillings for their 2-bedroom house, it will be 25,000 shillings up until the time they take the property and it becomes their property. So that's on the tenant side and dealing with fairness on the tenant side. If today you are a developer, what's in it for you? If you are developer X, we come and tell you that jointly with the county government of Nairobi, we have made this land available. We will give you vacant possession of this property. We have terminated road infrastructure, sewage infrastructure, power. We've provided ducts for the telecommunication service providers, and we have basically zoned the place in the master plan to be a communal place. So there's space for school, there's space for kids to play, there's space for commercial activities to happen within that space. That place has been zoned. So you as the developer come, you are to build 2,000 houses, you come with your financing. You sign an agreement with the off-taker, with the county government, with the national government, basically saying you will build this number of houses to this standard. And the standards are very exacting. If you look at the development framework guidelines that have been published, they set out very clearly, we will regulate the cost per square meter, we will regulate the quality of the build, what we call the space, because today in Kenya people get duped. They are told come and buy a 2-bedroom house, but the 2-bedroom house is the size of a closet. What you'll be sold here is a defined product measured in square meters. you will know what you are getting in terms of value. From our own assessment, we will be able to cut down the cost of construction from an average of 67 to 70,000 shillings per square meter to under 40,000 shillings per square meter. And this is because we've taken out quite a number of issues which are not the developer's concern. Those are costs that will be underwritten between the governments at national and county level. When you build the houses as a developer, what you get from the government is a guarantee to off-take the houses, provided they meet all the criteria set. So our professionals in this space, our architects, our QSs, the people who are responsible for ensuring a quality product comes out below budget, hopefully, or at budget at worst, and at the quality that was prescribed. That developer is given his money, exits from the project. The Kenya Housing Development Fund now has a number of units. This is where it gets very interesting. So today, if you are a pension fund or you are managing asset wealth for big insurance concerns and you're looking for guaranteed cash flow, the Kenya Housing Development Fund can tell you, I had a waiting list for this project. I can actually fill these 2,000 houses next week. I have a pending list of people. They have all paid their commitment fee. They are ready to take up these houses as soon as they get possession, as soon as you are able to give possession. You are able to then sell as Kenya Housing Development Fund to a pension scheme or to somebody else a tradable cash flow. Because 1,000 houses at 25,000 a piece per month, guaranteed, with a waiting list. If you default, you can be replaced in 6 months. If you're a defaulting tenant owner and you can't pay, you'll be given time to regularize, but if you can't, the house will be taken away from you and given to somebody who is serious about that commitment. So you create secondary value. What does that start to do? It starts to guarantee a correction in the market. And it starts to create value for real estate, and it starts to unlock some of the money that we have had tied up in this country. It also starts to give our big insurance and asset wealth and pension schemes alternative investments that are safe, secure, and stable. So if you have a stable investment that can give you between 5 and 10% return, why not take it rather than speculate and go do quails or something equally bizarre? Now, that's the perspective from the developer. You then have another category on mortgages. So, how many of you, let me just do a litmus test. How many of you have mortgages? How many people in this room have taken mortgages? So I'd say maybe less than a tenth of the people in this room have taken mortgages. And that's reflective of two things. One is that people don't feel safe because mortgages are just priced out of reach. It's too expensive for ordinary folk. Number two, it doesn't make commercial sense for you because the reality today is that rent and mortgage is at a ratio of 1 to 1.5. So if you take a mortgage today and your monthly repayment to the bank is 100,000, chances are the maximum you can get rental value for that unit is 70 or 80,000, maximum. So it doesn't make sense. In fact, for you, you're just saying, look, I'm just buying an asset, maybe I'll give this to my children, or the worst comes to the worst, I'll have a place to retire. And that's the thinking. That's why we've never progressed before beyond 24,000. We will never increase this figure if we don't have an affirmative action by the government on the question of affordable, in the segment of affordable housing. And here we are looking at rental between 30 to just under 100,000 shillings. So when we talk to your SACCO should be able to ideally come to the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, or your bank should be able to come to the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company and basically take what would have been a 14% or 14% on paper, maybe 16% in reality because of the hidden charges that come with it. They should be able to take that 14% and lend it to you at below 10. We are targeting a much more aggressive figure, and we are working with the financial institutions to see where we will land. The sweet spot for us will be between 7 and 8%. We don't know whether we can make it up to that point, but I know the team at the Housing Ministry is working night and day with the Treasury to see whether we can make an intervention that allows us to refinance mortgages at between 8 and 10%. Now, what does that do? Immediately, your rent to mortgage ratio changes. So your rent becomes more than your mortgage. So you can earn an income from your rent, and you don't have to dip back into your pocket to pay the bank. What it then means is that you, all of a sudden, as a young investor, maybe you have a few million shillings, rather than go buy one house, you can put a down payment for 4 houses and take mortgages on all of them, because your rental payment will be able to service your debt. We start seeing a more realistic demand for housing, and we start seeing a more discerning developer, because there's 2 sets of housing. Private developers will not stop building houses, but they will respond by improving their quality, lowering their cost, and we will also try to do our best to remove factors which should not, factors around the certainty of title. That's what makes some of this land very expensive. You spend a year doing due diligence on a piece of land because the legal certainty around the ownership is a problem. You have challenges getting approvals from the county governments or from the relevant offices. So trying to streamline that. Our aspiration is a one-stop shop. Thankfully, our governors are so bullish about this program that they have been more than supportive in trying to get a Huduma type structure put for a one-stop shop for planning approvals. So it creates an environment where we start seeing mobility. Hopefully we start seeing houses coming both from private sector and the government supported programs. We are quite confident that this 500,000 will be well on track by the time we get to 2022. So this aspiration is not built on hot air. There are very clear fundamentals that have been put in place. This is the first time that such radical changes have been made to both the legal and the policy framework for land and ownership of property and construction of houses. So in terms of incentives, if you're a developer today, 15% corporation tax immediately if you build over 100 units, and 100 units is nothing. We have both DFIs and other people queuing to give money. And the reason they are queuing to give money is because the issue of trust and guaranteed offtake has been addressed by the government in terms of the Kenya Housing Development Fund. So it's not them just dishing out money which will disappear. Today, if a credible investor is able to pull together a consortium to come and build 2,000-3,000 houses, they will find the money available in this town. There is a lot of interest from large-scale overseas developers, all of whom are looking at Kenya as a new market for them. You have people like the Turks who have been able to do 50,000, 60,000 units in a number of months in earthquake-prone areas. You have interest from conglomerates from India, from China. But we want that business primarily to start here with Kenyans spearheading these developments. Because all this money must first of all percolate within our own business environment. We have the question of local content. Part of the development guidelines you will look at prescribes standards for doors, standards for windows, some of the common user items that can be replicated en masse. We expect all those inputs to be provided by Kenyan companies large, small, micro. And we have engaged them at granular level to see whether they can provide. Because what is a window frame? It's not nuclear science, you know. Provided you are given the measurements, the quality, and what you need to build, and a fair chance to supply it, it will be done. So I'm hoping, as I talk, you can see that this is something that has been well thought out. The reason why the president made it a priority was not so much just for home ownership, but because of the catalytic effect it would have. Number one, in just getting our housing sector to a standard that makes sense. Number two, trying to improve the whole mortgage scenario. Because we are caught in a place where the only person walking into the bank today is government and big corporations. That has to change. But there must be something must be done to trigger that change. And this is one of those programs. We also have a backward issue, which is who will build these houses? The actual builders, because today there are not enough builders. Even for the 50,000 units that come on stream, there are not enough quality builders. The number of people who can build a staircase straight, a wall that is straight, a window that is straight, those are few. Because a lot of our people have been apprentices who have learned from people who were apprentices, who maybe 10 years ago met somebody who had gone to the poly and was trained properly. We expect that the investment the government has put in technical training institutes across this country, when we have over 130 of them equipped with modern cutting-edge equipment to train carpenters using new technology, digital technology, masons, welders, and the most elusive of them all, plumbers who can actually do a job and not have to come back the next day. And we keep asking, you know, we take it for granted that those people are available. They're not available. I am sure when you have a plumber, there's a plumber that is shared between 15 of you. And that guy will tell you, no, niko kwa so and so leo, I can't come to your place. But you have a crisis. And it's a reality. So when you see, you know, our champion for TVET is the deputy president. When you see us now looking contemptuous of university education, it's because we don't actually need more graduates in certain fields holding papers that cannot be turned into salaries the next day. What we need are people with a skill. They go in for 6 months. By the time the guy comes out, he's in need. He can do something with his hands, make some money, and put some money in his pocket. And it just helps everything move along quickly. So this is a plan for us that we get so excited about. It's been very difficult trying to explain to people because everything appeared to be disjointed. And trying to explain to people, why are we doubling down on technical and vocational training institutes? Why have we put so much money into this thing? If you go to your constituency or your county, you will see a new TTI, either opened or under construction. Today, if you go to HELB, you can get a HELB loan of 90,000 shillings if you have been admitted to a technical training institute. You can get a bursary of 40,000 shillings. So we are basically saying, you go, we'll give you whatever money you want. Just go to this school, learn something, come back in. On the other side, we have to create the demand by triggering this thing. And this whole housing program has been like pulling teeth because we have turned conventional wisdom on its head. We have moved from an exchequer-driven arrangement where all procurement was done by government to one that is more facilitative, and we'll see the private sector taking a bigger role and the government receding to the role of regulatory work and quality checks and just ensuring parity for all. So I'm hoping that I have excited you a little bit and that each one of you will be an ambassador for this program. On our part, we don't sleep. We work day and night to make this thing happen. We hope to start breaking ground on some of the programs, particularly with the county government of Nairobi, the showpiece programs. We work very closely with our development partners on this. And it's because we have other countries that have done this better than us. So we are trying to learn as much as possible from them. But Nairobi of 10 years from today will be a very different city. A lot of your residents' associations will be vertical associations, because if you have a building with 300 families in one building, that is an association in and of itself. You know? And you have to visualize a situation where every morning between 7 and 8, thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming onto the road at the same time. Because none of you has stopped. I've not seen anyone declaring that there will be no more children being born. You know, we are still, our birth rate has not reduced dramatically. So for the foreseeable future, we will have pressure on housing. And for the foreseeable future, we are going to have to redefine how we live, because we cannot build horizontally anymore. But when we build vertically, we also have to ensure that those facilities are safe, they're secure, they're environmentally conscious, and they make sense. We've been criticized very often about why are we in an energy surplus position. This is a very temporary situation, I assure you. We have, I think, about 200 or something megawatts lying unutilized. But it is a very temporary situation, extremely temporary, because every county government now is starting to see the benefit of street lighting. That's one. We expect cities to be lit, not to be lit because somebody needs to walk there at that particular time. They should be lit just because. Your town should be lit because people should be able to do business at any time, anywhere, you know. And these are the benefits. I thought there was nothing to be gained by MCAs traveling for benchmarking, but I stand corrected. The level of thinking that has changed at the county level in terms of the aspirations for counties, you can see that the exposure by our leaders at that level has changed. Now they want street lighting, all of them. Now they want 24-hour businesses. When we have very difficult negotiations on roads, because today roads, some are built from class A to class C, is built by national government. Class D going down is built by county governments. But in a lot of those cases, these are roads within neighborhoods, within town centers, within places. The demand for this infrastructure is so high. Even when government has eased back on borrowing, because we think we have now got sufficient resources to address our current infrastructure gap. We are moving more to PPP. But you can see county government saying, no, as we want to do our own infrastructure bonds because we can't move at your pace. This is all a factor of exposure. So I think there is a bright future ahead for us. I think your thoughts, your contributions to the development framework, to the housing guidelines, people should not be fixated too much on today. As they say, perfect is the enemy of good. We can spend a lot of time trying to perfect something and never do it. We are not shy about doing things. If we get it wrong, we come back and do it again. But you have to try and move this. People always said Kenya would be water secure by 2000, the year 2000. Every household would have a tap. But what was done? How many dams were built? Now, when we tell you by 2022 certain things will happen, we are quite sure because we have put the building blocks in place. And I want you to have the confidence that this is not a passing phase for us. We will work hand in hand with all the stakeholders to make sure this happens, and we hope to count on your support as we do this. Thank you very much for your kind attention.